Hey guys, Julian here, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make modern acid techno like Amelie and Regal. As usual, you can get the project file and the samples, MIDI, and presets, and all that kind of stuff in this video in the description. And if you're a patron on my Patreon, check there because it'll be available shortly. Let's begin. Alright, so we're at 132 BPM. This is the loop you heard in the intro, and the first sound we have here is the kick, which sounds like this. And so it's a pretty standard, sort of like hard-hitting, sort of rumbly techno kick. Usually with these kind of tracks, what you would have is, even though you have the 303 here, which is technically a bass, usually, as you can hear when I solo that, the 303 isn't really doing like the deep low end like that. Like, it wouldn't really work. So instead what you have is like a rumbly kick like this. And then you just kind of mix them to work together. So what I've done for the kick here is basically I have this group, and what's happening is I have one track which is just like the hit of the kick, just like the punch, and then we have this track which is just the rumble. And the way that I did this is basically I just have the kick by itself, and then I have some processing on top of that is doing the rumble. So then what's happening is I have these two in this group, and then they're being processed as a group. So I'll show you, like I said, the kick by itself, it's just dry. The rumble sounds like this. And basically what we have going on here is we have our kick just playing dry, and then it's going into some effects. So there's dry. The first effect that we have here is a simple delay, which sounds like this. So this is doing sort of like the delay that you were hearing. Basically, you could do these in a lot of different ways. Like, you could use reverb, you could use delay, pretty much anything you can think of. But it just has to be kind of like an intense bassy rumbling like that. So that's the first thing. After that, we have the Saturator and this utility, which kind of go together. So the Saturator sounds like this. You can hear what's happening is it's kind of messing up the high end a bit. Like, the high end sounds atrocious, but the low end is really deep and rumbly. And that's what we want. And then the utility after that is just converting it to mono. Just because you don't really want like this rumbly bass to be in stereo. But yeah, you can see the Saturator is set like this. Pretty simple there. Just have to drive up. I'm using the wave shaper to kind of really go crazy with it. And then yeah, the utility is just converting it to mono. After that, we just have an auto filter, which sounds like this. So this is taking just that low end. This is why I was saying the like crispy, weird high end doesn't really matter, is because we're just taking the low end. And when you layer this with the regular kick, there you go. And then the last thing that we have here is just this auto pan. I'm using this to sort of like get a bit of that fake sort of sidechain pump. I didn't want to sidechain into this kick because it's a little bit long and sometimes that can be weird, so I'm just using this. So you can see I've got the auto pan, the phase is on 0, so it's just affecting the mono volume. I've got it on the saw waveform, which is inverted, so it's going up, and then we just have this on quarter notes. So that's how you kind of do this. And this way it's not like clashing with the kick, because you can hear. Yeah, when I have it off versus when I turn it on, it's a lot cleaner when it's turned on. So that is the rumble. And then, like I said, I have these two in a group, and I'm just processing them together. So this is how you would usually do it. You know, like if you just had these on the same track, like however you would do it with an audio effect track or whatever, you could, you would just be putting this after that. But yeah, so the first thing I have here is this drum bus. So here's what it sounds like with no processing, and I'll kind of like reverse it for you. So here's what it sounds like without anything. And the first thing we have is this drum bus, which sounds like this. You can hear this is fattening it up a lot. This is basically just adding some more kind of like thickness to the sound. I've got the boom up here, so it's adding a bit of low end as well. It's tuned to G, that's the key we're in. And yeah, after that we just have a bit of compression, just to kind of help glue these together a little bit more. You can see it's only really compressing the peaks, and I have the attack up pretty high, so it's pretty safe. It's really, like I said, just gluing these together a little bit more. And it kind of fattens the whole thing up. And then the last thing we have on here is just an EQ8, which sounds like this. So what this is doing is it's just cutting out the sort of muddy frequencies around like 200 hertz. Because even though this is meant to be like a rumble kick, you don't really want like muddy rumble. You want it to be very smooth. So I'm cutting those out just to make room for that. And then we have a bit of a low end boost, just to give it a little bit more like kind of punchy low end. And that is it for the kick. So the next thing we have here is the 303, which sounds like this. And so I'll show you the notes on this one, and I want to talk about this a little bit because I know it can be kind of hard to write these type of patterns. And what I recommend you do is think rhythmically as opposed to sort of like melodically. Because if you look at this, if I fold this, maybe we'll see. You can see these are all actually just G and G sharp. It's literally just G and then a semitone up. But what really matters here is the pattern. Like you can hear how this plays off in the kick. So like I think the way that I wrote this was basically I did something like this. Like I just kind of wrote in like like stuff like that, and just kind of start on one note, and then you can go in and kind of keep doing more stuff. So if we bring this back over here. So yeah, it's not that difficult. Like I said, it's really just jumping around different octaves. You can see we have like some sliding notes. The only other thing to mention is you can see not all of the notes are touching each other. So we have like some notes like here and here, where you can see I left a little space in between that note and the next note. And this is also important. You want kind of like a more staccato pattern for this, so it's a bit tighter and you don't get like you can hear if I put this on legato mode. It's not got that same kind of tight sound. So yeah, here is how I made the sounds. So for this one, I made this using Operator, and I'm not doing any FM here. All this is just saw wave, really simple stuff, going into a bandpass filter. And then if I turn off all these effects, you can kind of hear what we're starting with here. So this is what it sounds like coming out of Operator. So basically, we're using this bandpass filter with just a little bit of resonance. And then you can see I have an envelope on them. The envelope's shaped like this, and then we're automating the frequency. So this is something important. Like if you're making this kind of techno and you want to have a 303, it gets really boring if you just have it sit in the same place the whole track. So I have this automating. You could do this like by hand, like if you have a MIDI controller, or if you're using a live synth to do this. But just any kind of thing, like this is just even a little bit of automation. Like this took me probably less than 30 seconds to come up with this automation here, but it just adds a lot of movement. But yeah, so that's the sound coming out of Operator. As you can hear, not the best. The bandpass tends to make it kind of thin, but that's what all this other stuff is for. The only other thing I want to talk about here is the glide. So you can see I have the voices set to 1, meaning it's monophonic. Only one note can be played at a time with this synth. And then you can see I have this glide here, and so this is for those overlapping notes where it's like those kind of things. So yeah, after that, the first effect we have here is the Saturator, which sounds like this. So you can hear this is just taking it and distorting it and giving it more fatness and more kind of texture. Again, it goes from this to this. So you can hear when we have a really like harmonically rich sound like this saw wave going into a bandpass filter with a really high resonance, the Saturator really helps, and you can do a lot with saturation. Like you can hear it really brings out a lot of cool frequencies there. So yeah, I just have to drive up a bit, I just have the bass frequency up a bit, and that is it for the Saturator. After that we have this amp, which sounds like this. So you can hear that does the last little bit of kind of like fattening it up and adding that like crunchy distortion to it. Amp simulators are really, really good for 303 sounds. Like if you have Guitar Rig or something like that, or even like Waves, GTR, Amplitude, all those different kinds of things, bias, you can use these on your 303s and really synths in general. But it's a really good way to get like a big kind of thicker distortion, because you can hear even after the Saturator, it was still a bit thin sounding. But yeah, this just takes it and blows it out the last little bit. So after that, we just have this echo, which is set like this. You can hear it's just doing 8th notes, pretty simple stuff, just gives it some space so it's not just like super dry the whole time. Then we have a little bit of reverb, which you can see with this, I just have the decay time and the size down and the dry wet down as well. This is just to give it a little bit more space. And yeah, after that we have a bit of drum bus, which is just doing a bit of kind of like extra fattening up at the end of the chain, if that makes any sense. Here's without it. And then with it. So yeah, you can hear it really helps to kind of give it a little bit more fatness and just bring it all together. At the end, I got the drive up a bit on the crunch a little bit as well. And then after that, we just have an EQ8 cutting out the line, because like I said, you don't want it to clash with the kick. You can hear when I turn off the EQ, it gets kind of messy. And then we just have an auto pan doing that same kind of like faux side chain that I was using on the rumble for the kick. So that is the 303. The next thing we have here is this pad, which sounds like this. So this is really simple. It's just kind of like one of these icy sounding sort of like FM pads. Basically, it's just playing a G minor chord. I'm just taking the A sharp, the middle note, or the minor third, whatever you want to call it, and put it up an octave there. Just to kind of spread it out. Makes it sound a bit darker because you're getting that minor, that super, super minor voice on top, so it stands out a lot more. And yeah, so for the sound on this one, I made this using Operator. And what this is it's basically this kind of like FM sound I made. You can hear, and then I have it going into a low pass filter. So there's just a bunch of sine waves, just doing some FM, pretty simple stuff. And then I have it going into a low pass, and then the low pass has this LFO on here. So you can hear it's just kind of moving and opening and closing throughout the track. So, you know, just a nice way to give it some movement. It's like with the 303. If you just have it sitting in the same place, it gets really boring. So that is it for Inside of Operator. After that, I just have a bit of reverb just to give it some more space. Pretty much a no-brainer with any kind of pad sound. Then we have the Haas Effect. And what the Haas Effect is doing is just giving it a bit of like a wider stereo image. The way it works is basically take a sound, split it into the left and the right signals, or I guess the left, whatever it would be on your end. But yeah, and then once you do this, you take one of them and push it forward ever so slightly. So you can see I have two chains here in this audio effect track. We got the right chain, the left chain, and then on the left chain I have the simple delay. And that's what this is doing. You can see we don't have the feedback here, so I'm just delaying the signal forward a little bit. 10 milliseconds here, and it gives it a wider stereo image. So here's without it. And then with it. So yeah, you can hear like it really helps to bring this out. After that, we just have an auto pan for another kind of like faux sidechain here. And the last thing we have on here is just an EQ8 cutting out the low end. And that is it for the pad. So then the next thing that we have here is this sort of like hi-hat section, which sounds like this. So basically what it is it's three sounds. It's this 909 hi-hat, which is playing on the upbeats, this shaker, which is playing on the upbeats, and then this shaker, which is just playing 16th notes. This is pretty standard, sort of like techno fare when it comes to percussion. Basically what we have here is we have the 909 hi-hat, which is kind of like punchier, and that's like the sort of like it's really hitting, you know? But then we layer it with the shaker. And you can hear the shaker is a little bit softer, so it's not going to give us that same punch, but it gives us a little bit more mid-range and just a bigger sound. Like, this sounds a lot better when you add the shaker in. Versus just having that 909 hi-hat on its own. And then also with the shaker, you can see we just have this little echo doing 16th notes. Pretty simple stuff, just gives it a little bit more space and helps to set it apart from the 909 hi-hat. But yeah, this is very important, like, for layering. You need to layer your hi-hats for this style. Like, to really get that, like, the super crisp, modern sort of techno hi-hats, you need to layer, like, kind of higher-end, more, like, punchy sound like this, with more of a mid-rangey sort of like shaker like this. And then the other shaker, pretty simple, it's just doing 16 notes. One thing you'll notice here is I did kind of make it a little bit sharper by just shortening that. Just kind of a nice technique to make it a little bit sharper, like I said. So after that, we have these two little percussion sounds which sound like this. So basically, it's just a clap. You can hear the clap. And then this little 909 rim shot. And basically, they're just playing at like the end of every bar or so, just to give it kind of like some extra punctuation, you know? Otherwise, it would just be kind of boring. And then on these, I have a few effects. You can see on the clap, I have like a 16th note echo, a little bit of reverb, some drum bus to kind of beef it up a bit, and then just an EQ8 cutting out the low end. And then the 909 rim shot is actually very similar. You can see, yeah, we've got an 8th note delay on that. We have this really short reverb with a bit of pre-delay. And then I have a drum bus to beef it up and an EQ8 cutting out the low end. And then after that, I have those hi-hats and the percussion in this group. And so this is kind of like with the kick, or like what I say a lot in these videos with like, you know, any sound that's kind of similar, like your kick and your bass or your percussion or anything like that, you want to kind of group it together or bus it together, as is the more technical term, I believe. Because it's going to make everything gel a lot more, and it's just going to make your track sound a lot more cohesive. So that's what we have here. So I'll show you what this percussion sounds like. Here's without any group processing. And then with all of it. So you can hear it. It really helps. So the first thing we have here is this drum bus, which sounds like this. Here's without it, and then with it. So you can hear this is just kind of fattening everything up a little bit. It's helping to tie everything together as well because it's saturating everything a little bit. And when you put saturation on top of everything, it helps to kind of like gel it by giving everything a little bit more of a similar texture. After that, we just have this compressor, which sounds like this. Here's without it. And then with it. So you can hear it's just taking everything and helping to not necessarily flatten it out. Like you can hear and see. There's still quite a bit of dynamic range in here if we look at this VU meter. But it's just helping to get all the volume levels more even. And make everything more cohesive that way. And then the other thing you can see here is I've got the attack turned up a little bit. So basically the way the attack on a compressor works is it's like the longer your attack time is, the longer it takes to come in. And this is useful with percussion because if you look at our percussion, like I'll show you the clap for example, you can see like we have what's called a transient. Basically like this area that I'm highlighting right now, which is just like the very start of the hit. And what happens is if you compress it too much without playing with the attack, you can mess up the transient, and the transient will become as flat as everything else, and it won't even sound like a percussion hit. It'll just sound like a flat sound. And so that's where this comes in. By turning up the attack time, we can make it take a little bit longer for the compression to kick in. So essentially, we're only compressing like the body of the sound over here, but not any of like this range up here. So yeah, that's the purpose of turning that attack up. And then the last thing we have on here is just an EQ8 cutting out the lawn. So it's just cutting out the lawn and cleaning everything up. And I have a little bit of a high-end boost. You can hear it's subtle, but it's like that extra little bit of polish at the end of the sound. And yeah, so that's pretty much it for this one. I just wanted to show you guys some techniques to make kind of like more modern stuff because, like, okay, if you just Google acid techno, you're going to find like a bunch of like random old school tracks with like 808 drums and like a 303 with no distortion on it, which is cool, but this particular sound is obviously very influenced by that, but very different from it. So I wanted to make a video just kind of showing you like what you can do to make stuff in this house. So that was me for this one, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed. As usual, make sure to let me know what you think of this video in the comments, and make sure to like this video as well as subscribe and hit that little notification bell so you don't miss any of my videos. Like I said at the beginning, you can get the project file and the samples and MIDI and presets and all that kind of stuff in the description. And if you're a patron on my Patreon, check the links. Will be available very shortly. Thank you so much, everybody, and I will see you tomorrow with another video.